We often believe that self-love is about self-care, about treating ourselves kindly or taking moments to rest. But real self-love, the kind that is unshakable, begins with understanding why we exist. If we don't have a reason for being, then any love we attempt to give ourselves is fragile. It's conditional. It's based on fleeting achievements, on the opinions of others, or on moments of validation. But when we start with why, when we understand the deep reason behind who we are and what we stand for, our love for ourselves transforms. It becomes unconditional because it is no longer tied to what we do, but to who we are. Consider a great leader. The ones we admire most are not the ones who simply achieve success, but the ones who stand for something greater than themselves. The ones who inspire us do so because they are clear on their why. They know their purpose, their cause, and that clarity creates an unbreakable foundation. It gives them resilience. It gives them the ability to push forward in the face of adversity. And that same principle applies to self-love. Too often, we look for self-love in external places. We seek it through achievement. We think that if we accomplish enough, we'll finally feel worthy. We chase promotions, accolades, wealth, relationships, all in the hope that they will confirm our worth. But self-love is not something that can be found outside of us. It is something that must be cultivated from within. It starts when we ask, why am I here? What impact do I want to have? What do I truly believe in? Think of a tree. The strength of a tree is not in its branches or leaves. It's in its roots. The deeper the roots, the more stable the tree, the more grounded it is, the more it can withstand storms, droughts, and the challenges that nature throws at it. Our self-love works the same way. If our sense of worth is built on surface-level things, on appearance, on achievements, on external validation, then it is weak. It can be taken away at any moment. But if it is rooted in something deeper, in something that is unchanging, then no failure, no rejection, no setback can shake it. That's why starting with why is the foundation of true self-love. When we are clear on our purpose, we don't need external validation to feel valuable. Our worth is no longer dictated by circumstances. It's no longer dictated by comparison. It becomes intrinsic. We don't need to prove ourselves to be worthy. We just are. And when we reach that level of clarity, something incredible happens. Our actions become more intentional. We stop chasing things that don't matter. We stop seeking approval from those who don't align with our values. We stop engaging in behaviors that compromise our integrity. Instead, we start living with purpose. This doesn't mean that doubts won't creep in. It doesn't mean that we'll never struggle with self-worth. But when those moments come, we have something to hold on to. We have a foundation that keeps us steady. That foundation is our why. If you think about it, every great movement, every great company, every great leader, none of them were defined by what they did. They were defined by why they did it. Apple is not just a technology company. It exists to challenge the status quo. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just fight for civil rights. He stood for a dream, a vision of equality. And the same applies to us. We are not defined by what we accomplish. We are defined by the reason behind our actions. So self-love is not a destination. It is not something we arrive at once we've achieved enough. It is a process of continuously reconnecting with our why. It is a daily practice of reminding ourselves that our value is not earned, it is inherent. The search for self-love begins the moment we stop looking for it in external achievements and start looking for it in our purpose. We live in a world that constantly tells us that our worth is measured by how others perceive us. From a young age, we are conditioned to seek approval, grades in school, praise from parents, promotions at work, likes on social media. We are taught, either directly or indirectly, that love and validation are rewards we must earn. And so we chase them. We work harder. We strive to be better. We shape ourselves into what we think others want us to be, believing that once we reach a certain level of success, happiness, or admiration, we will finally feel whole. But here's the problem. External validation is a mirage. The reason validation feels so good is because in that moment, it fills a void. It gives us a temporary sense of worthiness. But like any quick fix, the effect wears off. The moment the applause fades, the moment the attention shifts, we find ourselves right back where we started, searching for the next thing that will make us feel worthy again. It's a cycle, a never-ending loop that keeps us chasing something that was never meant to sustain us. True fulfillment, on the other hand, does not come from external validation. It comes from alignment. It comes from knowing that the way we are living is in harmony with who we truly are. It is not about impressing others. It is about being at peace with ourselves. And that peace can only come when we shift our focus inward. Think about the people we admire most, the ones who seem truly content, truly confident in themselves. They are not the ones who have the most followers or the biggest paychecks. They are the ones who live with conviction. They do not mold themselves to fit society's expectations. They live according to their own values. They do not seek approval. They operate with integrity. They do not let others define their worth. They define it for themselves. The irony is, the more we seek external validation, the less we feel worthy. Why? Because when our worth is dependent on others, we give them power over us. We let them decide if we are good enough. We let their opinions dictate how we feel about ourselves. And in doing so, we lose touch with the only validation that truly matters, the validation that comes from within. Self-love is not about receiving constant praise. It is not about proving ourselves to the world. It is about recognizing that our worth is not conditional. It is not something that can be given or taken away. It simply is. The challenge is that breaking free from the need for validation requires us to redefine success. Most of us have spent our entire lives measuring our value by external markers, how much we achieve, how much we earn, how much recognition we receive. But true success is not measured by external achievement. It is measured by how closely we live in alignment with our values. When we prioritize fulfillment over validation, everything changes. We stop seeking approval from people who don't truly see us. We stop engaging in behaviors that go against our integrity just to fit in. We stop chasing things that do not bring us genuine joy. Instead, we start making choices that feel right, even if they don't impress others. We start valuing our inner peace more than our public image. We start embracing who we are rather than who we think the world wants us to be. This is not easy. The need for validation is deeply ingrained in us. But the first step toward real self-love is recognizing that external validation is an illusion. It is a bottomless cup that will never be full. The only way to feel truly worthy is to stop looking outside and start looking within. We often think of self-love as something that happens in isolation, something we cultivate by focusing on ourselves, by practicing self-care, by doing inner work. And while all of those things are important, there is one element of self-love that is often overlooked: service. The greatest sense of self-worth does not come from looking inward alone. It comes from looking outward, from contributing to something greater than ourselves. When we focus only on ourselves, our achievements, our status, our personal growth, it is easy to fall into the trap of self-doubt. We question whether we are enough. We compare ourselves to others. We feel pressure to prove our worth. But the moment we shift our attention from what we can get to what we can give, everything changes. Service, whether it's helping a friend, mentoring someone, or making a difference in our community, pulls us out of our own insecurities. It reminds us that our worth is not measured by what we accomplish, but by the impact we have on others. It is in those moments of giving, of contributing, that we experience a deep and undeniable sense of purpose. Consider the most fulfilled people you know, the ones who radiate confidence, not because they have the most money or accolades, but because they move through the world with a deep sense of meaning. These people are almost always those who have dedicated themselves to serving others in some way. They do not wake up every day wondering if they are enough. They wake up with a mission to help, to inspire, to contribute. And in that process, they discover their own worth. There is a reason why so many people who struggle with self-worth find healing in acts of service, volunteering, mentoring, leading. It shifts the focus from, am I enough, to how can I help? It removes the burden of self-judgment and replaces it with purpose. When we see the impact we can have, when we witness how our presence, our kindness, our contributions make a difference in someone else's life, we begin to understand our own value. But service is not just about grand gestures or self-sacrifice. It does not mean neglecting ourselves or putting others first at the expense of our well-being. True service is about using our gifts, our talents, our experiences to lift others up. And in doing so, we lift ourselves. The paradox of self-worth is that the more we chase it directly, the more elusive it becomes. But the moment we focus on adding value to the world, on making even the smallest difference, self-worth stops being a question. It becomes a natural byproduct of living with purpose. So if we struggle to love ourselves, if we wrestle with doubt or feelings of inadequacy, maybe the answer is not to turn further inward, but to look outward, to find ways to serve, to connect, to contribute, because in lifting others, we lift ourselves. Leadership is not about titles or authority. It's about influence, vision, and the ability to inspire those around us. The best leaders don't lead with control. They lead with care. They cultivate trust, foster environments where people feel safe, and encourage others to grow. But what if we applied these same leadership principles to ourselves? What if instead of leading teams or organizations, we focused on leading ourselves with the same level of compassion, patience, and encouragement? Too often we are our own harshest critics. We demand perfection, punish ourselves for mistakes, and set unrealistic expectations. We would never treat a team member or a loved one the way we treat ourselves. Yet, we believe that self-criticism is the path to improvement. The truth is, great leadership doesn't come from fear, and neither does self-love. Just as great leaders create an environment where people feel supported and empowered, we must create that same environment within ourselves. One of the most powerful leadership principles is psychological safety, the idea that people perform at their best when they feel safe to take risks, make mistakes, and be vulnerable. When people fear judgment or punishment, they hold back, they hesitate, they doubt themselves. But when they know they are supported, they take bold action, they grow, they thrive. The same applies to our relationship with ourselves. If we constantly judge ourselves, if we make self-love conditional on achievement, we create an inner environment of fear, we hesitate to try new things, we become afraid of failure, we doubt our worth. But when we lead ourselves with self-compassion, when we allow ourselves to make mistakes, when we give ourselves the grace to learn and grow, we create the foundation for true self-love. Another leadership principle that applies to self-compassion is vision. The best leaders don't just react to circumstances. They have a clear vision for the future. They know where they're going, and they make decisions based on that long-term perspective. But when it comes to ourselves, we often get stuck in the present moment of frustration or disappointment. We define ourselves by our failures instead of seeing them as stepping stones. A great leader wouldn't fire a team member for making one mistake. They would invest in their growth. In the same way, we must learn to see our setbacks not as reflections of our worth, but as part of our journey. And then there's the principle of serving others. The best leaders don't lead for personal gain. They lead to serve a greater cause. True leaders measure their success not by what they achieve for themselves, but by how they uplift those around them. And yet, many of us measure our self-worth only by what we accomplish personally. What if instead we measured it by how we contribute to the world? What if self-love wasn't just about how we feel about ourselves, but about how we lead our own lives in a way that inspires and helps others? Leadership is about responsibility, and the same is true for self-love. It is our responsibility to lead ourselves with compassion, to build an inner environment that fosters growth, to recognize that our worth is not determined by external success, but by the way we show up for ourselves and others. True self-love, like great leadership, is not about perfection. It's about progress, about resilience. It's about showing up every day with the intention to be better, not because we are not enough, but because we are worthy of the effort. Just as leaders shape the environments in which people thrive, we shape the environments in which our own self-love can grow or wither. We often think of self-love as an internal process, something we must cultivate within ourselves through mindset shifts and personal reflection. And while that is true, the reality is that our external environment plays a massive role in how we see ourselves, how we treat ourselves, and ultimately, how much love we allow ourselves to receive. Think about it. No great leader expects their team to thrive in an environment of constant negativity, fear, or chaos. They don't expect people to perform their best when surrounded by toxic influences. Instead, they carefully cultivate a space where people feel supported, valued, and encouraged to grow. So why do we expect ourselves to develop self-love while keeping ourselves in environments that make it nearly impossible? The people we surround ourselves with, the information we consume, the habits we reinforce, these all shape the way we see ourselves. If we are constantly surrounded by criticism, whether from others or from ourselves, self-love becomes an uphill battle. If we consume content that makes us feel inadequate, if we engage in relationships that drain us, if we allow negativity to dominate our surroundings, then self-love will always feel like something just out of reach. To build an environment that fosters self-love, we must be intentional. It starts with the people we allow into our lives. Are the people around us supportive, or do they constantly make us question our worth? Do they celebrate our growth, or do they diminish our confidence? The truth is, no matter how much inner work we do, if we remain in an environment that contradicts that work, we will struggle. Just as leaders remove toxic influences from their teams, we must be willing to remove toxic influences from our lives. Then there's the way we speak to ourselves. Our internal dialogue is part of our environment. If we constantly criticize ourselves, if we allow our inner voice to be cruel and unforgiving, then we are living in an emotional space that makes self-love nearly impossible. A great leader speaks to their team with encouragement, not because they ignore mistakes, but because they understand that growth happens in a space of support, not fear. The same applies to us. We must train our inner voice to be the kind of leader we would want to follow, firm but kind, honest but encouraging. And then there's the space we create physically. Our physical surroundings impact our mental and emotional state more than we realize. The way we organize our space, the energy we allow into it, the daily habits we maintain, all of these contribute to whether we feel at peace or overwhelmed. Self-love is easier to cultivate in a space that feels safe, uplifting, and intentional. Ultimately, self-love is not just about what we think or feel. It's about what we allow, what we reinforce, and what we build around us. If we want to truly love ourselves, we must create an environment that makes it possible. Just as great leaders cultivate spaces where people can grow, we must do the same for ourselves. Because when we do, self-love stops being something we chase and starts being something that simply exists. Self-love is not a finish line. It is not something we achieve once and then never have to work on again. It is an ongoing process, a journey without an endpoint, an infinite game. The problem is, most of us approach self-love as if it's a goal to be reached. We think, once I accomplish this, then I will love myself. Once I fix this part of me, then I will be worthy. But self-love does not operate in the finite game of achievements and checklists. It is not about reaching a destination. It is about learning to embrace ourselves fully while still growing. Simon Sinek speaks about the concept of the infinite game. The idea that in business, leadership, and life, the goal is not to win, but to stay in the game, to continuously improve, to play for something greater than short-term victories. The same applies to self-love as something we must win. We set ourselves up for frustration. Because the truth is, there will always be setbacks, there will always be moments of doubt, there will always be areas where we fall short of our own expectations. And if we believe that self-love is about eliminating all insecurities, all imperfections, all struggles, then we are playing the wrong game. Real self-love exists in tension. It is the balance between acceptance and ambition, between embracing who we are in this moment while also striving to become better. It is understanding that loving ourselves does not mean we stop growing. It means we grow from a place of worthiness rather than a place of lack. The mistake many people make is thinking that self-love means complacency, that if we truly love ourselves, we will stop pushing ourselves, stop striving, stop evolving. But that is not true love. That is stagnation. True love, whether for ourselves or for others, means wanting the best, believing in potential, encouraging growth. Just as a great leader does not settle for less than our best selves. At the same time, growth without acceptance becomes self-rejection. If we are constantly chasing self-improvement because we believe we are not enough, then we are not growing. We are running from the fear that who we are as we are is not worthy, and that kind of growth is unsustainable. It leads to burnout. It leads to never feeling satisfied, never feeling good enough, no matter how much we accomplish. The key is to embrace both, to strive for growth while practicing radical self-acceptance, to understand that we are always a work in progress, and that is a good thing. That our worth is not tied to how much we improve, but that improvement is still a natural and meaningful part of our journey. Self-love, like leadership, is an infinite game. It is something we commit to, not something we complete. Some days we will feel deeply connected to ourselves, confident and strong. Other days we will struggle. But the goal is not perfection. The goal is to stay in the game, to show up for ourselves again and again with patience, with kindness, with the understanding that love is not a destination. It is a choice we make every single day. We often think of self-love as something deeply personal, something that affects only us. But the truth is, the way we love ourselves doesn't just shape our own lives. It shapes the lives of those around us. Self-love is not an isolated experience. It is a ripple that extends outward, influencing how we lead, how we support others, and ultimately the legacy we leave behind. Simon Sinek speaks often about the idea of legacy, not as something we build through personal achievements, but as something we create through the impact we have on others. In the same way, self-love is not just about how we feel internally, it is about how our relationship with ourselves affects the way we interact with the world. When we lack self-love, it shows up in how we lead, in how we treat others, and how we approach challenges. But when we cultivate deep, authentic self-love, we don't just benefit ourselves, we create an environment where others feel safe to do the same. Think about the leaders who have inspired you the most, the ones who made you feel valued, capable, and empowered. Chances are they were not just skilled or intelligent, they were also deeply grounded in themselves. They were secure enough to uplift others, confident enough to be generous, and strong enough to lead with kindness. This is the power of self-love. It is not just about personal fulfillment, it is about what we create in the world because of it. When we truly love ourselves, we lead differently, we parent differently, we mentor differently. We stop operating from a place of fear and insecurity, and instead we lead from a place of abundance. We set better examples. We inspire through action. We show others through the way we carry ourselves, through the way we treat ourselves, that worth is not something to be earned, but something that already exists within them. This is how self-love becomes a legacy, not through words, but through the way it shapes our presence in the world, through the quiet confidence we bring into a room, through the way we empower others, not by fixing them, but by showing them that they were never broken. And so the search for self-love is not just for us. It is for our families, our communities, our workplaces. It is for the people who look to us for guidance, for the next generation watching us, for the strangers who cross our paths and feel, even for a moment, that they too are enough. Because when we love ourselves fully, we give others permission to do the same. And that is a legacy.